and welcome to my channel, In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and this is my weekly wrap-up. It's Tuesday evening. Yesterday was a day off, and tonight I am home much earlier than usual because it's a long story, one thing after another, but my oldest son is sick again. Anyway, so I'm home in the evening. He has some kind of virus, and anyway, so no obligations for the rest of the evening except for to return this book to the library. So I wanted to film this real quick before I go drop it off at the library. And that is The Summer Book by Tove Jansson, which I believe is the correct way to say her name. And this is the book that I am reading for the Tea and Ink Society Read the Classics Challenge. The challenge for February is to read a book, a Nordic or Scandinavian classic. And if you remember, or if you watched my video from my February TBR, I talked about how I wanted to read a book from my Finnish heritage. So that's why I picked The Summer Book by Tove Jansson, who was Finnish, although she was Swedish speaking. So originally the book was written in Swedish. And it was written in 1972, I believe. If you are not familiar with this author, she is the author of the Moomins, the Moomin Troll series, which I've not actually read, but I want to, but I've not. I don't know anything about it, but I know that it's very popular. And anyway, she is the author of that. So I picked up this one, and I really enjoyed it overall. I don't know, I haven't written my Goodreads review yet. I'm not sure how many stars I'll give it. Probably around 4, somewhere around 4 stars. The strength here of this writing is in the descriptions and in really putting you right there in this setting. So you feel like you are on these islands in the Gulf of Finland. And it's about a little girl, Sophia, and her grandmother. Her father is there, but he doesn't really do much or say much in the story. Most of the time he's working at a desk, so or he's out fishing while they're on the island. It's mostly about Sophia and her grandmother and their interactions and their exploration of the island and island life in the summer in the Gulf of Finland. And basically, their little family of 3 spends every summer at the island. I don't know where the mother is. There is the assumption that the mother has passed away, and the little girl, Sophia, shows some signs of probably working through her grief. So I think that probably it happened very recently, before this book takes place. Some people say that this is like all one summer on the island. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's just collectively the experiences of a girl and her grandmother on the island where they spend their summers in the Gulf of Finland. Probably in the 50s, 60s era, because I believe that the author based this on her cousin's experience, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's what I read. Anyway, it's not a linear story. It's just a collection of vignettes. Each chapter is kind of, it's not very long, and it's just one little scene in the life of a summer, and it skips around. I think like one of the first chapters, it talks about June, and then another chapter is talking about early, like when they first get there, like in May. So it kind of skips around, but then the last chapter is definitely about leaving the island and closing up their house and everything, and going back to the mainland for the fall and winter. So it's just very immersive. It's immersive in that experience of living in the island, and it's about living in the island primarily, and what it's like to live there on the island, and the nature there, and the culture of the people who live on those little islands and how they interact with one another. And especially it's about the relationship between grandmother and Sophia, and the conversations that they have. Some of them trite and some of them quite deep. And grandmother is obviously at the end of her life. There's some intimation at the end of the story that she is about ready to pass on. And Sophia is, of course, just at the beginning of her life. So there's a great contrast there that's interesting. One of the main themes that I felt in this book is that of perspective. You have grandmother's perspective of having lived a long life, and of times having changed, and of feeling old and weak and unwell as she nears the end of her life, and how that shifts her perspective. And then you have Sophia's perspective of having obviously experienced loss. She has some frustration with her father, who is there. He's present, but he's not active and involved for much of the story. And so you have Sophia's perspective of that. You have Sophia's perspective of the things that she's afraid of, and the things that she knows or she thinks she knows, or the curiosity of the things that she wants to know. You have perspective, their differing perspective on heavier matters, matters of religion, of faith in God. And there's really one really fun, not a fun chapter, but it was, I enjoyed this chapter. It was, they go to another island where her dad has set out some nets, and so he's doing some fishing, and they plan to have a picnic on this island, but there's a huge storm coming. Of course, Sophia doesn't know, none of them knew before they went there, that there was a big storm coming. So, Sophia gets bored because her dad takes a nap, and then her grandmother is always taking a nap because she's always tired. And so Sophia is bored, and so she starts praying that God would do something big, like maybe send a storm or something. And sure enough, this big storm comes rolling in. And at first, Sophia is all excited because God heard her prayer and answered it, and there was a big storm, and God did something exciting just for her. And then her grandmother starts talking about all of the things that could go wrong in a big storm like this, things at their house on their island that could go wrong, or, you know, ships could capsize, or people could be lost at sea, etc., all of these things. And so then Sophia starts to feel guilty because she's like, I prayed for this storm and God answered me, and it's my fault all these bad things are going to happen. And it takes a little bit for grandmother to catch on that that's what Sophia's perspective is. But then when she realizes it, then she countermands it by saying, oh, well, it wasn't you. I prayed for a storm this morning. It was me. And so Sophia just believes her, you know, with all of the faith and innocence of youth. And so then she's like, oh, well, then it's your fault. And her grandmother's like, yeah, but, you know, I also prayed that God would, you know, take care of everything. I forget exactly how she concludes it. And Sophia's like, okay, well, I'll forgive you then. So that was just a cute little vignette in the story. So those kinds of stories, those kinds of things, those kinds of interactions. So if you really only read plot-driven books, you won't like this because there's not really a plot. Definitely character-driven. Definitely all about the setting and the place, and definitely about the perspective. One thing I really liked is that the author, like, she does like big perspective, like with the storm coming, you know, like she's describing it, you know, like in big terms, but then there's also these scenes where she gets down to the minutest detail of what the like in one particular scene, the grandmother is lying down and taking one of her many naps that she takes throughout the book, and she's lying down, and you know, the description is all about what she sees right in her like field of vision, right in front of her as she's lying down, like the blade of grass and what's on the blade of grass and like a tuft of like dried seaweed or something. And so you get this little tiny microcosm perspective, as well as the big perspective of a raging storm that's rolling in on the beach and covering up almost the entire island. So yeah, it was really enjoyable in that sense. I do generally prefer more of a story, but it was wonderful to read and very enjoyable. One caveat, because this bothered me, not enough for me to keep reading, but enough for me to be like, really, was that necessary? And I know that some people this would bother them enough that they wouldn't want to read the book at all. And that is that there's definitely some cussing in here, not like all throughout. There's just, you know, a handful of places, but it's not just like mild cussing. There's like some pretty serious cuss words in here, especially taking Christ's name in vain, which is one that I have a really hard time with. That really doesn't sit well with me, especially when it's a 6-year-old girl doing it, and she does it often enough that I was like, okay, did we need to do that? I don't think we needed to do that. Really didn't need to do that. That was not necessary. So that was the main thing that I didn't like about it. Otherwise, everything else about the narrative was pretty good. And also, like I said, Sophia's exhibiting signs of dealing with grief. And so she does often come across as an angry child. Like many times, instead of just saying that like she said something, it says that she screamed something. And she says things to her grandmother that really are not very nice. And but her grandmother just takes it all in stride and, you know, deals with her very, very patiently and in her own way, very lovingly. And I don't think it's just supposed to be, I don't think that it's lost in translation. Like it could have been. That's sometimes was my thought. Well, maybe screamed is one English word you could use for whatever Finnish word or whatever Swedish word was being used there, but maybe it would be just as accurate to say yelled or shouted, which would have less of an intense idea to it, or hollered or you know, something like that. So that could be the case. But some of the things she says genuinely just sound kind of angry. So I think it's just that she's struggling a little bit with loss. And I think that that's part of it, part of who Sophia is. But then there's also some really very sweet moments between her and her grandmother as well. So that is the summer book by Tove Jansson. And then I finished reading The Letter Tree, which I was buddy reading with Taylor from Tales and Treats with Tay. And I really enjoyed it. I think probably 3.5 to 5 stars for this one. Not that I strongly disliked it, but I didn't like love it. It wasn't like, and maybe that may have been like expectations, because I know a lot of people, other booktubers who read this book when it came out last fall, and they just really loved it and were raving about it. And sometimes when a book gets like high expectations in my mind, I expect too much from it. And then when I read it, I'm a little bit disappointed. And honestly, the first part of the book, I was more like really into it and interested and enjoying it. And then I read The Lily of Ludgate Hill with Mimi Matthews, and then I came back to this one. And honestly, the writing paled in comparison to Mimi Matthews. Like Mimi Matthews' writing was just that much better, like a little notch higher than the writing here. The writing in this one seemed a little bit elementary when I came back to it. A little elementary is a strong word, but just, you know, just simpler, less complex of a writing style. There was less going on, fewer layers, etc. So the writing wasn't like top notch, in my opinion. The characters and the storyline were very interesting. It's like Romeo and Juliet meets You've Got Mail, which was a very interesting mashup, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed their exchange of letters, and then as they discovered that they were writing letters to each other, and then working through getting over the boundaries, or the not the boundaries, but the roadblocks in way of their relationship, which was namely their parents' feud with each other. And then along the way, they decided that the best way to be able to resolve the differences in their family is to figure out what caused the differences in the first place, So there's a little bit of a mystery there, a little bit of a minor investigation that goes on, and they try to figure out why their parents had this difference of opinion that caused the feud back in the day that kept them apart from each other. And so that was interesting, although I felt like everything in that aspect of the story wrapped up rather quickly. And there's also another side plot where the girl's father, Laura, her father wants her to strike up a relationship with this potential businessman that he wants to have dealings with, who is single. And so initially Laura is very receptive to the idea. She likes the guy well enough, but then she begins to realize that not all is not what it seems. So then there's a whole plot involving that. And I feel like that one especially got wrapped up really suddenly and quickly. In a kind of unrealistic way. So I was a little bit disappointed with the way some of these story threads got tied up super neatly without, I don't know. It was just too sudden for me. And then my other quibble with it was that first of all, you know, with Thomas Nelson, I'm sure you've heard other booktubers say it's a Christian publishing company, but they publish a lot of clean fiction. There is nothing specifically Christian about this. It's just a clean fiction book. And beyond that, I was a little disappointed in the follow your heart messaging that was a big theme in the story, at least through parts of it. I feel like follow your heart is kind of like the opposite of true biblical teaching. So I dislike it when Christians emphasize that sort of idea of following your heart. Not that the characters in this story wanted anything bad. They wanted good things and they were trying to do good things. And so not that they wanted to do anything wrong. It's just that really vague, pseudo moralistic idea of following your heart. It's just bad advice. So I didn't really like that. Overall, there's a huge theme of reconciliation and forgiveness, which is very Christian. So in that aspect, I can understand it being published by a Christian publishing company. However, the reconciliation happened between the second generation, but between the members of the first generation, they were still working their way towards that at the end of the story. So it wasn't complete and it wasn't from the heart yet from either one of them. So that felt a little bit unfinished. Like there was a little bit of unfinished business in that aspect of theme of the story. So, however, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a waste of my time. I'm glad I read it. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. And I thought that the plot was, the main plot between the two characters and the feud between the families was creative and well done. And I liked the backstory of the families and everything. But I did have some caveats and some quibbles with it. It's not my favorite ever. So I don't know. It's probably, as I'm talking about it, I'm going to say 3.5 stars. I haven't yet put my finished review up on Goodreads because by the time I make this video, I probably will have, but I wanted to leave more of my final thoughts in our buddy read with Taylor before I put it on Goodreads so that we can get each other's thoughts before I blast them out to the world, so to speak. So that is what I have finished so far this week. Okay, my feet are falling asleep. Oh. Okay, so I'm having all kinds of issues. Feet falling asleep. And so now I am sitting on the popcorn tin. Anyways, and I'm almost done. So then my phone was like, ran out of storage. Anyways, just to finish up this little clip here before I wrap it up for the day. I want to finish of the books that I'm working on, And the Dead Shall Rise, Gentle and Lowly, and Beren and Luthien. I want to finish the last one this week, hopefully. So I'm going to keep working on Beren and Luthien this week, and hopefully have another clip of that to add to this video. And also this Saturday, my husband and I will be celebrating our 18th anniversary. And I did a poll in my community tab, which quite a few of you, well, I'm assuming you, some people voted on to help us decide exactly how we're going to spend the day. And many people voted for trying to fit in all of the ideas that I had. So I need to see if I can make that work, because that's definitely very appealing to try and fit in all of those things. So we'll see. I don't know if I'll actually be able to do that. But anyways, I will probably take a few clips of that and have that here as well. And yeah, that's what I got going on this week. So we'll see what else happens, and I will check in with you later. Hello, it is Saturday afternoon, and this day did not turn out quite as expected. As I mentioned before, we were intending to celebrate our anniversary today, but my husband got sick. In the past couple of days, he's been in bed with a fever. He doesn't have a fever anymore, and he is doing much better, but he was still kind of tired today, so not up for gallivanting around and doing all the things that we had originally intended to do. So he is taking a nap right now, and I am filming this. We did, however, we were able to enjoy a really lovely lunch slash brunch at a restaurant in town called The Conch, which is has a chocolatier. It's owned by a chocolatier who is the chef, and they incorporate like chocolate into all of the recipes, even the savory recipes, and really so delicious. We've never actually eaten there, so that was a nice experience. It's a great place for a date or anniversary, a special one. You can see the fun that we had. That was how we managed to celebrate our anniversary. We've agreed that we would like to do a little more in-depth celebration whenever we have time. Who knows? We did put a little rain check on our anniversary celebration. But for now, enjoy the clips of our lovely little anniversary date outing to the Conch. This morning, the day started off with celebrating my sister's birthday. So we are just celebrating all the things this weekend. And she wanted to go to a recently renovated, revamped, I'm not sure if it's under new ownership or if they just like renovated. It didn't look that much different from the last time I was there, but I don't know. Anyways, it was a cute restaurant and had, it was delicious. We enjoyed it. And then we went to a new coffee shop in town afterwards and spent some time chatting about books, among many other things. So that was a great deal of fun. So I have had a great day, in spite of the fact that it didn't turn out so well. And very serendipitously, in between the restaurant this morning and the coffee shop, I spied a little free library that I did not even know was right there in my downtown. So that was fun. So here are some clips from my morning with my sisters. Now here I am. I just went to a thrift store before I came home to do these videos. They were having half off all the women's clothing and shoes. And I found this cute mug. Let's see if I can show it to you without the ring light getting in the way. It's Mount Vernon, which is the home of, well, was the home of George Washington, George and Martha Washington. That ring light glare is really cramping my style here. But anyways, it's so cute. And I love this. I'm starting to really love this size of mug. It's like the perfect size. You can drink it all before it gets cold. And it's just an adorable size. So I made myself a little, well, I mean, I was kind of trying to make a cappuccino, but I'm really struggling with learning how to do the foam part right. So it's really just sort of a latte, but like about half coffee and half milk, froth, not foam, steamed milk. That's what I'm looking for. With a little sprinkling of cardamom rose sprinkle on the top. So anyway, in my cute little Mount Vernon mug. Okay, so I just want to wrap up this video. I did manage to finish reading this for this weekly wrap up. I did manage to finish reading Beren and Luthien by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I read that for the Protagonist Pub's February book club read, and that was really, the story of Beren and Luthien was a completely delightful read. I really enjoyed the actual story. So the format of this book was not necessarily what I was expecting. J.R.R. Tolkien's son, Christopher, edited it and compiled it. And he was extracting the story of Beren and Luthien from other manuscripts and works of Tolkien's. And interspersed with the telling of the story, he has some notes that kind of help explain where he took the extracts from and the changes that were made in the story along the way, because the story kind of shifted in form as Tolkien played around with it. And so it was not like it's not a straightforward through story all the way. There's like interruptions along the way with chapters by Christopher Tolkien explaining where he took this extract from and what was going on, what the changes are, etc. The parts that he wrote, the edited parts, were very dry, and we all agreed, those of us in the book club so far, very textbook-like, and not at all what I was expecting. I think they are helpful to give the full context, but I would really love to see someone take this story and just write it straight through, like either mix and match the pieces from the different ways that the different variations of the story that Tolkien told throughout the various manuscripts that he was writing it, or just to choose one of them and just write it through. I think the poem one would make an absolutely gorgeous picture book. And I think like maybe a kind of longish one, but I think a really beautiful children's picture book would just be gorgeous. So I think that someone should totally do this. I also think that someone should turn this into a ballet, because our main character, Luthien, who Beren, the guy, calls Tenuviel, she has magical powers in her dancing. And so she's always dancing in the story. And just the descriptions and the settings and the fairy tale-like interactions of everybody, and the fairy tale-like characters and the fairy tale-like setting just make it perfect for like a classic style ballet. And I wish I knew someone who choreographed ballets or wrote music for ballets, and I would tell them, you need to make this a ballet, because it would be amazing. So anyway, I really enjoyed that story very much. The edited notes, I don't know what you want to call them, whatever, that Christopher Tolkien contributed, I think it was very helpful, but I would much have preferred just the story, just straight through, because it was a beautiful story. It was beautifully told. I loved the language that Tolkien used that makes it sound like it's like a real fairy tale from ages ago, and just incredibly beautiful. But so probably overall I would give it 4.5 stars. But for the actual story, if you just want to get the book and read the actual story parts, like there's in the beginning, the first part is told as if it's like a fable being recounted orally by someone, which was beautiful. And then there is a poem form. If you just read those two parts and just got the actual story, that's really, honestly, all you need to read in this book. And that would be 5+ stars for me, because that was really gorgeous. So that's that one, and I'm really glad I read that. And that is the first Tolkien that I've read all the way through. So, yay me! So that is something that an author that I can cross off my list of authors I want to try. So, I am still reading Gentle and Lowly, totally on track to finish this next Thursday, which will be the last day of February, or this coming Thursday as you're watching this. Really enjoying it, really thick with tabs here, highlights all over the place. I just really have been enjoying this so much. And yeah, the last chapter I read was about the verse in Isaiah where God says, my ways are not your ways and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, etc. And he analyzes that passage through the context of it, like the whole context of the passage, which this is one of those verses that is very often taken out of context. And, you know, when anything that happens in our life that we're like, we don't understand or we don't know what's going on, or when there are things that confuse us, we say, okay, well, God's ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. And we just don't understand what he's doing. And I think that's true. I don't think that's an inappropriate understanding, but he goes through so much deeper than that. And he's looking at the whole context of the verse and he's comparing it to other verses in scripture. And really what God is saying there is, you guys, you know, you quickly get angry with each other and you dismiss each other and you judge each other. But I am forbearing and patient and forgiving and merciful, and my ways are much higher than your ways. And so that was really an eye-opening look at that particular passage. And then there's in another chapter, he talks about in Exodus chapter 34, where Moses asks God to show him his glory, and then he has to hide in the cleft of the rock and God's glory passes by. And then he talks about how in the New Testament, in the Gospels, there is a very parallel sequence of what happened there in Exodus to what happened when Jesus was on earth. And I'll just read this little part. The revelation of Exodus 34 follows a miraculous feeding from Exodus chapter 16, and discussion of the Sabbath, Exodus chapter 31, involves God's representative leader talking with God on a mountain, that's Moses, concludes with God's people as terrified of, calmed by, drawing near to, and speaking with God's representative leader as this leader comes down from the mountain. And that's what happens immediately in chapter 34 of Exodus. And then is immediately followed by a recounting of marveling among the people as the object of their worship goes in the midst of the people, same chapter, and is then followed thereafter by a further meeting between God's representative leader and God, resulting in the leader's face shining radiantly. So that's the context of everything that's happening in Exodus chapter 34, where Moses catches a little glimpse of God's glory. And so then it says, every one of these narrative details occurs in Mark 6, 45 to 52, and its surrounding context as Jesus walks on the water. As he says in the footnote, there is a miraculous feeding in earlier in Mark chapter 6, discussion of the Sabbath, even earlier in the chapter 6, God's representative leader talking with God on a mountain, later on in chapter 6, concluding with God's people terrified of, calmed by, drawing near to, and speaking with God's representative leader as this leader comes down the mountain, later in chapter 6, is immediately followed by a recounting of marveling among the people as Jesus in the midst of the people, also in chapter 6, and is followed thereafter by a further meeting between God's representative leader and God, resulting in the leader's face shining radiantly, and that is in chapter 9 of Mark. So that was just like, whoa. And then he adds further context by explaining how, you know, when Jesus walked in the water, it says, it's something that we just gloss over and just don't really think about much, that Jesus was actually intending to pass by. And it's, you know, the question is why? Why was he just passing by? Why wasn't he going to them on purpose? And so then the next paragraph in this book says, and now we begin to see why Jesus intended to pass by his disciples, struggling at the oars on the Sea of Galilee. The text says that he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them. Why would he intend to pass by them? The reason is that Jesus does not merely intend to pass by the disciples the way one car on the highway might pass by others. His passing by is far more significant and only understood against its Old Testament background. 4 times in Exodus 33-34, the Lord says he will pass by Moses. The Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, using the same word that I won't try to say, that Mark uses. The Lord passed by Moses and revealed that his deepest glory is seen in his mercy and grace. Jesus came to do in flesh and blood what God had done only in wind and voice in the Old Testament. How cool is that? I love reading insights like that from people who have deeply studied the scriptures, and I love it when people are able to draw parallels between the Old Testament and New Testament, things that, we don't always notice in just a casual reading of scripture, but drawing those comparisons and making those analogies and seeing the overall story that God is telling us in his word. Really amazing. So I have been really enjoying that so much. And still working on this. I read some more in it this week, and it's been so fascinating. I won't say a lot about it now, but the thought occurred to me as I was reading it. I was like, this is like reading a Dickens novel. No, it's not written like a novel. It's written very, very factually. Interesting, but very factual. And so it doesn't read like a novel or fiction, but it feels like you're in a Dickens novel because, first of all, huge cast of characters. There are so many people that are being brought into this story here. First of all, and secondly, there are so many like political elements, factions involved. Like even in the Dickens book that I just read back last fall, Little Dorrit, there's like Dickens went off on this whole chapter about this imaginary, but it was based on a real bureaucratic arm of the government, and he made this whole parody chapter about it, and was like poking fun at it and exposing the flaws of a typical British bureaucratic government entity. And like that is happening all over the place here. Only it's real life and it's not satire, it's actually going on. And the different factions and how they're best trying to represent their own interests, and how there's the mystery, a real life mystery, because of these people who are so bent on making whoever their group is, whether it's Jewish or white or black, look good, or whether it's the city council or the police department or whoever's running for mayor or whatever, like they're all trying to look good to the public, instead of just really getting after the truth. And so the truth, honestly, because of that, is still hidden 100 years later, and who will ever know what really happened that day? I don't know. So it's a very interesting, and yeah, if Dickens were still around, he would probably be inspired to write a book from this story. So that is all that I have in progress. Oh, that's not true. I got this from the library, which is The Portable Romantic Poets. In my Regency tag, I share that I have read quite a bit, actually, quite a lot of romantic poems, but I haven't like sat down and read, okay, I'm reading Burns poetry, I am reading Keats poetry, I am reading Wordsworth's poetry, etc. I've just read, the popular poems from that time. So I really want to just get a sense of, a poet of the time. So I got this book of romantic poets from the library, and I am reading through the section with Burns' his best poetry. So I am enjoying that. And then, because it's my anniversary weekend, I have 2 romance novels that I am probably going to pick up and read over the next couple of days. Starting tonight. This one I've heard really good things about. Angela Strong, Husband Auditions. I believe it is, it's contemporary, romantic, I think it's comedy. I think, not 100% sure, but anyways, I'm going to read that one. I've had that in a stack for a while. I borrowed from my sister, so I need to read that and get that back to her. And then A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting by Sophie Irwin, which has gotten really good reviews and is a fun Regency novel, I think. So gonna pick those up over the weekend and see how much of them I can get read. And yeah, that has been my week. So I hope you have also had a great week, and I will see you next time. Bye.